I saw the headline.
I did. Everybody has a copy of the minutes? Yes? Okay.
Oh.
Are you ready? Got our chair?
Yeah. All right.
You ready?
We will start without Mr. Fisher. Yes, sir. Oh. Okay, yes.
I can call meeting to order. And Jeff, Jason, you do the invocation for us, please.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this great day. Thank you for this opportunity to serve this great community, Lord. I just pray that you bless our conversation. Thank you again for just being able to be here and do the things that we do, and for this board. And in your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes of the last meeting? If so, we got, make a motion to approve.
I got a comment,
Yes, sir.
correction. My first name's Gilbert, my last name's Stewart. So in section 1, where you're talking about those people that were given the oath of service, Stewart's the last name.
Okay, gotcha. We'll make that
No big
correct.
deal, I answered either one. You were being correct.
What was added to the end.
Okay.
Any others? Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Like, disapprove, say aye. None, it carries. No old business. New business. Jason, is this you?
This is, isn't this not approval of the minutes? Yeah.
No, we've finished that. Yeah.
Okay. New business today, we have, we're gonna do our mock hearing. I apologize for not being as prepared as I wanted to be today. We were robbed this morning, and then I also have about 6-hour-old new grandbaby.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
But Mr. Fisher was gonna be here to help us kind of go through this. Some of it, portion of it was my own experience as well, but we would go ahead and start without him. Today, somebody asked if we could go through kind of a mock trial. And what we're going to do is Dr. Woodruff has volunteered to play the role of the citizen who has written in for the appeal for the hearing that we supposedly would have had. And Mr. Fisher was going to walk us through that. He's not here today, but I believe we can continue without him. So what I'd like to do is kind of try to present that. You have it in front of you. I have some stuff for you as well to view if we want to get into that. But just kind of go over what would happen during the meeting. And then if we need to stop and maybe ask some questions or get some clarification on that, we can go ahead and do that. If you would, you have a mock staff report that was given to you. Just if you would read that over by yourselves, and then once everybody's done, we can, if it's okay with the board, then we'll just go ahead and begin.
Would this be something that we would receive before the meeting?
Yes.
Jason, do you want to now go through the procedural part to explain how a case is actually presented before the board?
Yes. So normally, what I would do, what I would present to the board and to the attorney, just basically what you've read, present the facts and findings, what we've done as code enforcement, introduce the citizen, and then I believe give that citizen an opportunity to plead his case to the board. And at that time, once that is done, then it is then the board's turn to go ahead and ask the questions and make a determination of the appeal, correct?
So, once again, before I get into the role that I'm gonna play, the staff will also show you all of the information that they have given as far as notices. They will show to you that on such and such a date, this notice was prepared, it was delivered, here's an affidavit, or here's documentation that it was done. They will also explain to you in detail the sections of the code that are, so that you're not just taking their word that this is against the UDO or this is against the city code. What Phyllis or a staff member would do is to say, as you'll see in section 23 of the city code, it says such and such. In the UDO, it says such and such. So just like a hearing would occur relative to a judicial matter, you are in fact sitting as the jury, and it is the staff's responsibility to present to you the clear documentation of what the rules are, and then pictures and any type of evidence that Phyllis or Frank or Jason have that documents their position that there has been a violation of code. Now, Phyllis, you've been through this many times. Anything else you want to add as far as what the staff presents?
I'm actually working on a case that I didn't know you knew about. It looks just like this one. What I would present with your packet would be the pictures proving that they're doing the business there, and then the section of the ordinance that prohibits it, and a timeline for them to come into compliance or to come before, I guess, Jeremy Smith for a home occupation if their business use fits in a home occupation. Often it doesn't because they don't have all their equipment and everything on board. But that's what we would start with, and then you would hear them, hear us, and make a motion.
And part of what I was hoping Mr. Fisher would be here for is to help kind of explain the quasi-judicial procedure, because there are differences between what we're doing today and a court hearing. Just legally, there's some differences. So I kind of have some touch up on that, but basically we would do that, and we just might have that case come up here pretty soon for you guys anyway. So hopefully not, but that's what you're here for. So that's what this is for. What I'm giving you now.
So let's do this. At this point, let's actually begin the mock trial.
Okay.
And Jason, it's going to be, the first thing you're going to have to do is present to them your case that shows them what you believe I, as the citizen, have violated. So you ready to present your case?
Yes.
I've got a question. Prior to this hearing, would we be notified about the statute so we could read up on it before that?
Yes.
You would get a staff report that would have in it everything as far as all the documentation, the codes that they're supposedly violating, a packet that would show you basically everything the staff is going to present, and then whatever the citizen's written appeal is, that would come to you as a packet.
Which is all in this book.
Yes, that is one of two places that we get all of our whatever it is that we're citing for. We get it two places. One is the UDO, which you have, which is Unified Development Ordinance. That basically has to do with zoning issues. The other portion that we also enforce is the town's Muni Code, it's the city code of ordinance. Typically, the Muni Code is enforced by Jacksonville PD, Jacksonville Fire Department, So a lot of those nuisance codes and things like that are gonna come from that. A lot of this board is mainly gonna be out of the UDO, which is that book that you have in front
That's
of
your
you.
zoning law for the city. So you ready to present your case?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
All right. So, we received, a complaint on Mr. Yelnats.
I'm sorry, you pronounce that Yelnats.
Yelnats.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I apologize. Mr. Yelnats, we received a complaint on his property, regarding some construction equipment, some construction trucks, tools, and some construction, debris on this property. And he was parking, a couple of trailers with heavy equipment on them in the street. We contacted, Jacksonville PD after we conducted an investigation to confirm the violations, which we did. We spoke with Jacksonville PD to have him have the trailers removed from the street and let him know that the equipment could not stay there. We were not able to get a hold of Mr. Yale Nats, either by phone or in person, so a notice was sent. He did remove the trailer with the equipment from the street onto the front yard. So there was a trailer with some kind of backhoe, track hoe in the front yard, which is still a violation of the UDO, which I have in front of me here. But still no movement of the equipment or the construction debris. The notice gave Mr. Yelnats 10 days to abate the property and have the items removed, and nothing was moved. Another part of the complaint, which is against our ordinance, is that some of the workers were meeting at the house. So several trucks and cars would come to the house early in the morning. They'd leave their cars in the street and on the side of the house, so that they all traveled in one vehicle to whatever project they were working on, which again is a violation of the HOMOC that he was permitted with. Mr. Yelnats did not respond to our notice, so we held a hearing between myself, and the building inspector, Danny Bryan. Mr. Yelnats did not appear at the hearing, nor was a representative there. But he did, however, write to our community director, our community engagement director, with an appeal, which is why we're here today. Mr. Yelnats believes that he should be able to do what he's been doing, parking his equipment there, and his construction debris. He feels that if there is a grandfather clause, he's been doing it for 3 years, he doesn't see why he should stop now. And we basically kind of responded with, no matter how long he's been doing it, he's kind of been getting away with it this long. And just because he's been doing it for a long period of time doesn't make it right, and that's not how a grandfather clause works. So that's why we're here today.
If I remember correctly, then the chairman is the one who sort of conducts this hearing type thing, and then my job is to sort of moderate the thing. So I guess now I ask each of the board members if they have any questions for Jason or Mr. Yelnats.
Well, especially at this point, ask for Jason, the staff. Does anybody on the board have any questions relative to what the staff has presented, or do they need any more information?
I'd like to ask one question, if I may. I guess.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
I was like, I don't want to jump the gun here.
Jump.
Yeah, he mentions a grandfather, of course. The way I understand grandfathering, it depends upon when the code was established. Now, if he was doing this prior to the code being established, he could possibly be grandfathered. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a lot of misdirection with the grandfather clause. In this particular case, our UDO was accepted in 2014. He's claiming that he's only been doing this in the last 3 years. Even if We just adopted a UDO, however, and he's been doing this for 20 years. The clause has to be a legal clause. For instance, if we have a zoning area that allows for horses, and there's horses there, no problem, perfectly legal within our regulations and ordinances. If we have a zoning change that does not allow for horses, that's where grandfather clause come in. Now you can keep your horses, no problem. Once you leave and abandon that use for 180 days, you've lost that grandfather clause, and now you have to adopt the new ordinance. This does not pertain to this situation because, one, our UDO was accepted in 2014, 6 years ago. And two, even if it wasn't, it was never allowed in this area. It's never been a legal use. It's never been a conforming use.
But those are the type of questions you want to ask. And that was a good answer. That even if it had been, the testimony before you is going to be that I've only done this for the last 3 years. The code was adopted in 2014. Simple math says today's 2020, so how could I be grandfathered in if my activity started after the law said I couldn't do it? But that's the type of questions you want to ask.
James, go ahead, James.
It doesn't say here, but I assume that we're talking about an area that's zoned residential.
Yes, sir, this is
And that he has his business running out of his house. Does he have some kind of license to run his business out of his house? Is that required for him to do that?
good question. And that's another one of this, the violation. If you look on number 3, code enforcement sent a notice of violation for nuisance and a violation of home occupation. So he does have a home occupation. With the state of North Carolina just revoked the business licensing aspect of our ordinances, so we cannot require people to have a business license anymore. But if they want to conduct a business out of their home, they have to get a home occupation permit from planning and permitting. Now, Mr. Yelnats does have a home occupation permit, but there are parameters within that permit which would normally have been a part of your packet to see what he can and can't do. It's all a part of the plan. Whenever they apply for a home business, it has to be very clear and concise of what they want to do inside of that home. And some of the paperwork I have for you today will show you what is typical, what is allowed, what is not allowed. Everything that they do in a home has to resemble what normally would go on in a residential area. It can't change the atmosphere of the residency.
But, and again, this is not criticism of Jason, especially what he's been through. Normally what the staff will do in their presentation is they will say, we'd like to draw your attention to this. This is the zoning code of the city, section such and such. The property is zoned, and in my testimony, I'm gonna tell you it's R20. R20 is a large acreage zoning. So now I'm not the appellant. Right now I'm part of the staff in telling you this. We're gonna give you a copy of the zoning ordinance, and you're gonna see what the allowed uses are. We're gonna then explain to you, here is the home occupation guidelines of the city. You'll be able to read, and the staff will present to you, here are the 6 criteria that a home occupation must meet. We're now gonna show you his home occupation. It was issued in 2017. He signed it. He acknowledges the information and the regulations that apply to him. Think of this exactly like a court hearing. It's the staff's responsibility to provide to you all of the necessary data, one piece of information at a time, so you can understand why the staff believes that the citizen is in violation. Now, unfortunately, we haven't done that today, but in a normal hearing, that's exactly what we will do. Piece by piece by piece, not just an overview, but we're now going to present our case. Normally, it's going to take 15, 20 minutes for the staff to present that case, because just like building a house, they're going to lay the foundation, they're going to then start the next, and then they're going to say, from our perspective, this is why we believe he's in violation. But those are all good questions, but those are things that the staff will normally present when they're doing their presentation. Any other questions of the staff at this point? Yes, sir,
One
Doctor.
more quick question. When last week, or the last time we met, there was a discussion, and we talked about some person who had become disabled. And he was applying for a change of his residency that would have to have a ramp that would be in the 5-foot separation, which is against the code. So in our deliberations, then are we supposed to just look at the code and only respond to the code? In that case, the poor guy would not have gotten his ramp. Or are we supposed to look at the code and then evaluate whether or not what he's doing, even though it violates the code, would be something that would be appropriate in certain circumstances? You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, and today
Is that, or, and in that sense, then we would be like a jury. Common law is set by what the juries decide. So in that particular instance, then we would literally be changing the code for that particular area. Do we do that?
Well, to answer your question is, no, you don't. What you would do, and I remember the case with the ramp. What you would say is, we are ruling that the staff is correct. But then you would also potentially say, but there is another avenue. What you have filed is an appeal of their decision. What you should have filed is a variance petition or a variance petition asking for a variance of that setback. Because if you recall in that case, the ramp was not the issue. It was the fact that the ramp was encroaching into the front yard setback. And as a fixed structure, it could not be in the setback. The ultimate outcome on that mock trial was that the staff was right. You've appealed their decision. What we now suggest you do is you file a variance and see if the variance can be issued. And because of hardship, now hardships cannot be self-imposed. On the other hand, in that case, it was the variance that would solve this problem.
Okay, so in other words, potentially, just looking at it, if we could say to this person, well, you're against it, we agree with the staff, and then say you can file a different approach. Right, okay, I got you.
Jason, you've got, these employees have been parking at the house. Is that a violation?
It's a violation of the home occupation. It clearly states that they cannot meet at the house. And there's also a certain amount of trips that are allowed with a home occupation for the property owner himself. So they can't congregate at the property because that's not commemorative to residential
Gotcha.
living. So it's, and I apologize again for not having that today, but that would have been in the home application, clearly stated that they could not do that.
Okay. Can you walk there?
Parking around the corner and walking over to his house?
Live next door, across the street, have your neighbor work for you?
Is the
Probably
code,
not the best solution.
He would probably wouldn't have to, the parking's what you're writing up in it,
Yeah, the vehicle trips
on this.
staged at the property and meeting.
This is just real quick. So if there were never any complaints, then nothing would ever have happened. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Possibly. This was a complaint that was given that we inspected. We do proactive enforcement, so I don't think this would have gone by this long. Our officers are pretty good at spotting violations and abating them quickly. But if somehow they were tucked around some corner behind some trees and we never saw it happen, then, if there's cars flying down 17 from here to Newbern and there's no police officer out there with a radar gun, then a lot of people are gonna get by with speeding too.
Okay.
Kind of the same concept.
so does the code delineate how many X number of cars you can have parked in front of your house, or?
Yes, in the
Is there a
HOMOC,
specific number?
in the HOMOC application, all of those questions will be asked and are listed at X amount. You know, like if somebody works for Orkin, a pest control company, and they bring home a company truck and it's got a sticker on it, we're not gonna tell them they can't park in the driveway. Anybody that owns a home business and has a sticker on their car, we're not gonna tell them they can't have their own vehicle parked there. But there's a difference between a pickup truck with a sticker on it and a tractor trailer with a trailer hooked up to it and a bulldozer on it. That's commercial equipment, heavy equipment. There's actually a commercial definition, whether it's a HOMOC or not, you can't have it at the property. So I believe it's up to 2 vehicles belonging to the HOMOC itself that can be parked on the property. But whether the vehicles are in the street, in the driveway, on the grass, they can't meet at the property. So even if they park it on the street, around the corner, in the backyard, they're not allowed to conduct that type of activity at the home. They're not allowed to meet at the home and then disperse from there. Can't use it as a meeting point.
Does anybody have
Yeah,
any?
Debbie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse
Sorry,
me.
I've been through a few of these, and I know that if this was a home occupation case, Jeremy would be in here. And that's where
From the
Board
planning
of
department.
Board of Adjustment would direct their questions to, because that's his field of expertise.
Mhm.
And he basically would have been the one that assigned it and approved it. So he would be here, and if it was something with inspections, then that individual would be here to answer questions. So that's, the staff knows, but the individual who does this specific thing, the home occupation, he will be the one that you would ask your question, because when you have that file, like Dr. Woodruff said, you have pictures, you have the dates of the letters that were sent, the dates of the phone calls, and everything is in your file. And like I say, you would have gotten it, and you would have had a chance to read over exactly what it was. So when you got here, you would understand better, you would be able to direct your questions in a direct manner.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Gil.
The line there where it says he invites his workers over and has loud parties with them on weekends. You're gonna say that's within our purview?
I'm just stating that's part of my presentation, is stating the facts of the complaint. So that's what generated this conversation, is the complaint that came in. So we would want to present everything, because if I have a coworker over for the weekend, there's nothing against that. But if I'm having parties every weekend on the night and I have my whole crew over, that's gonna cause a problem.
I think we could have been real busy over Super Bowl weekend.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But no, that would,
But that's
that
not a
would,
That
violation.
sounds like, that's
That's
more
not a
like a
violation.
JPD problem than it is a Board
and
of
that's
Adjustment.
exactly where it would have gone. The reason I put that in there is because we won't always get one complaint, especially if it comes to the Board of Adjustment. We're more than likely gonna have more than one complaint with a lot of different complaints. And that's part of our responsibility, is to arrive and confirm those complaints. Yeah, it might be an issue, but is it a violation? Is it a blatant violation of the code or the UDO? Yes or no? So you're right, that's not what we're here to determine, whether or not they can and can't have equipment because they're having parties or not. But I do want to present that was part of the complaint that come from your citizens.
But you do bring up a good point. The staff should, as Jason said, if there are 5 things that the citizen complained about, they should all be presented to you. But the staff likewise should say, of these 5 things, here are the 3 that you actually have jurisdiction over. Because you're correct, you do not have jurisdiction over loud noise. You do not have jurisdiction over whether they stayed up too late. You don't have jurisdiction over whether the dog was barking or dancing to the music at the get-together. But
I'm safe then.
Now,
again, I was gonna say, again, those are the things that the staff should tell you. Here are all the things that citizens complained about. Here are the ones that are before you today.
And one of the noise complaints could have been, he goes outside and he warms up his truck and lets it sit and run for an hour before he leaves for work, making that noise. That would be a violation of our HOMOC, because he can't operate that equipment at the house. So that type of noise would be something that we would consider because it's a violation of the UDO according to definition of home occ and what's written in that permit. Now, party noise with his friends and coworkers, that's absolutely nothing to do with UDO in this meeting. But yeah, that would be clarified.
Any other questions for Phil? Now, we would like to see if anybody has any questions for this fine, outstanding businessman that the city's trying to jump all over here.
I appreciate the opportunity. My name is,
Oh, yeah, you're speaking.
my name is Jimmy Yelnats, and it is correct. I run a construction company called Yelnats Construction. As the staff has said, it's in the large acreage zoning. It's zoned R20. I have over 1.5 acres of land. My house sits back almost 80 feet from the street. And the street I live on, which is nowhere land, is a 20-foot wide street. It hasn't been paved and I don't know when. But guess what? There are only 3 other houses at the end of the street. So the fact that I park equipment there really doesn't inconvenience anybody. I'll tell you who complained. It was my wife's former husband. His name is Johnny Gone By. And what's happened is Mr. Gone By just doesn't like me. Now, why? I have no idea. But Johnny Gone By lives 2 houses down from us. He lives at the very end of the street. He has dogs, he has motorcycles, he has all those things. I've never complained about that. But because he doesn't like me, what he is doing is trying to make my life miserable. Let's talk about the equipment. First of all, I have a home occupation. Why? Because I'm a small businessman. I do not have the money necessary to go out and rent some big piece of property out here on Western Boulevard or down here on Central. I purposely bought that house 4 years ago to set up my business. Now, when it comes to the employees, these employees don't even live in this area. We are primarily doing work to repair roofs and houses that were damaged from Florence. These guys live in hotels. What they do, and how many are there? Are only 3. This is not like a crew of 20 or 30 people who works one of these big pro constructions or something like that. These are just 3 guys. Most of the time they come in individual cars. I have to admit their cars are old, but they're not here every day of the week. They're only here, for example, the day it rained. They didn't show up. We can't put a roof on when it's raining. But when they do show up, yeah, they park on the street. The other part is, look at my piece of property. When the police department asked me to move my trailer, which has a nice sized Bobcat on it, I use that in part of the demolition work and construction work I do. When they asked me to move it, I said, fine, that's what you guys want. I don't know who it's bothering, other than Johnny Gone By down the street. I'm just telling you, I moved it. Where did I move it? Into my front yard. Now remember, my house sits back 80 feet from the road. The back part of my property is low. I could have put the trailer all the way back there. But you know as well as I do, it's been raining. If I had gone back there, it would have simply marred up. So I put it on the high part of the property. Once again, who is it hurting? I'm sitting there 80 feet from the road. Other than my view out to the front of my house, I'm the only person who's being damaged by having that trailer out there in front of me. So I have to admit, I got the notices. I have to admit, I don't think that the city is being fair here. I think they're being heavy-handed. I moved the equipment when they asked me to move it. But again, I moved it on my own property. I could see it differently if this was a residential neighborhood like Carolina Forest, where houses are close together, everybody is right there, there are a lot of kids. There aren't even any children other than Johnny Gone By's children who even live in the area. And those kids are 12 and 13 years old, and they tear up and down the road every day on their motorcycles and go-karts. They make a whole lot more hazard than I do. As far as the grandfathering in, I've had that same truck and trailer and the same Bobcat for the full 3 years that I had a home occupation. And it's been parked in the exact same place until my good friend, Mr. Gone By, filed his appeal. I feel like I should be grandfathered in. Now, whether the word grandfathering is the right word or not, or simply the word is left me alone is the right word, you have to decide that. But what I'm saying is, once we have all the hurricane damage finished, those 3 guys who are from Tennessee who come down here on Monday morning and work till Friday afternoon and then go back home to Tennessee on the weekends, they're not gonna be there. I'm basically a one-man crew. That's within the home occupation. I guess what I could do is tell them, meet me at McDonald's every morning, and they park their cars in the McDonald's parking lot all day long and take up spaces there. But since I don't have a business location other than my house, where am I supposed to tell those guys to park their cars? So, I've appealed this. I'm, scratching my head because I just don't understand why in the zone I'm in with so few houses that the city should even be wasting their time. So I'm asking you to overturn the decision and approve my appeal. Do you have any questions on it?
Yes, they might have a question.
Yes. Your equipment that you use, you said, what kind of vehicles do you have? You got it on a flatbed truck, or is it a trailer being pulled by?
What I actually have is an F-350, which is a large pickup truck with a diesel engine. What I have is a 24-foot flatbed trailer that I tow behind it, and then on that trailer is a Bobcat. And as you know, a Bobcat is basically a type of backhoe. It's just a small Bobcat. It's a smaller vehicle.
So that's the only heavy equipment that we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
I have a question for the code enforcement. Is it any stipulations as far as like privacy fences? Like you had with vehicle salvage yards and things like that?
Absolutely, when it comes to commercial property, but not in residential. We can't screen in residential, if that's what you're referring to.
But if you had it screened in already, it wouldn't make any difference either.
If we couldn't,
If he already had a wooden fence in the backyard and could
if you had a wooden fence that would conceal a Bobcat on top of a trailer?
Yeah.
Well, again, if we don't know about it and nobody complains about it.
Even if you got a complaint, though, it's still a violation.
Correct,
Even
yes.
though it's
Yes.
screened.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions?
I've got a quick question. Would it be possible, as a way to maybe assuage some of the issues here, that you could meet your employees at each job site whenever you have a job, and then maybe bring them coffee and breakfast or something on those days, so that then they wouldn't have to meet at your house? And of course, if they met, it would only be for a day or two at any one site, and then you could move on to the next site. And so would that be an issue?
I think they could do that. Part of the problem is getting in touch with them every day to make sure they know when they're supposed to come to work. But, setting aside a second, what y'all should do is rule on whether what's happening is a violation. Now, you can certainly suggest solutions, which the doctor is doing, is suggesting solutions. So you could say that, okay, we do think this is a violation of what you're doing. As a solution, we can't direct, but we are suggesting that what you might do is follow. And that's pretty common in the construction industry, that especially if I'm running a framing crew, I tell the framing crew, okay, we're working at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, you guys need to show up there. But that's a good thought.
And in the same vein, is there some place in Jacksonville that you could rent for a small fee, where you could park your Bobcat at a better location?
Well, I'm gonna answer that. I'm now back as the person. The problem with that is theft. Bobcats are they're not inexpensive pieces of equipment, and they are definitely pieces of equipment people won't steal. I suppose that, I could find a place and rent it for $100 a month, but as a small businessman, that puts a burden on me. Also, the fact that I work long hours. I'm out of the house before the sun comes up. and I hardly ever get back before the sun comes down. And believe me, I'm looking forward to next weekend, not this coming weekend, but 2 weekends away. Why? Because daylight saving time comes back. And when that happens, I'm not gonna get home till 8 o'clock at night. Now, if you're asking me, would I voluntarily do that? No, because that means I'm gonna have to take either my truck loose from that trailer every day in the morning, have to hook it back up. That's gonna give me an extra hour's worth of work in the morning and in the evening combined. So if you're asking would I voluntarily do that, the answer is no. I think it's very reasonable to allow me to keep my equipment on my property, especially given the fact it's R20, large acreage, and there are only 3 other houses in that area. Who am I hurting? But that was a good suggestion.
Another question. 3 years ago, when I presume you applied for the, what is it?
Home occupation.
Home occupation permit, that all these conditions were explained to you at the time?
Yes, they were. I did not understand that I could not have my truck with my trailer and my piece of equipment there. It's a home occupation. I mean, to me, are you saying to a person who has a home occupation that they simply can't have any equipment to run their operation? And the fact is, it's not there during the day. The only time the equipment is there is when I'm working. And where do I work? Somewhere else. I don't actually work at my house. So the way I interpreted that was this. As long as I'm not there during the day, that equipment can come home at night. Now, whether that was a correct interpretation or not, to me, I'm in the construction business. I can understand if I'm running an accounting business out of my house. Where do I work all day long? I work in that house. How do I operate a home occupation at that location? I answer the phone, my wife answers the phone, we do our accounting, we do our billing, we pay our bills. But the actual work is done at your house, in your house, in your house.
Yeah, but, sir, you're parking there on weekends, and you're disturbing your neighbors. Don't you think it would be a good idea to move it somewhere else?
Well-
Because since you've been explained to you that it is a violation.
Well, I'm not gonna have a choice if you all rule against the appeal. On the other hand, I did move it off the street. Like I said, the house is over 80 feet back. I suppose what I could do, if we could reach a compromise here, is I'd be happy to bring in some fill dirt, because I've certainly got the equipment. And I could fix an area behind the house where it generally can't be seen from any of the neighbors. But again, I just don't feel like that it's right for me to have to take that equipment, rent a storage lot someplace, pay $100 a month for it, when I should be able to keep that equipment at least on the nights and weekends, as long as I can put it out of view.
Any other questions?
I don't know, I'd probably like to make a statement of some sort. I mean, I might
That's why we.
throw fuel to the fire, but it seems like if we allow something like this, where would it stop? I mean, you've got other businesses out there, I would assume, and they're being held feet to the fire to not do certain things like this. So I just can't, for the life of me, see doing that.
And is this sort of like everybody has a chance to ask, and then do you have final statements from each party, or do you?
Is that allowed for me to do something?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I mean, at this point, what you would do is say, does anybody have any further questions of the staff or of the Mr. Yeomans? And if the answer is no, then you should say, all right, let's have general discussion. And at that point, Ty would make the comments that he makes, the doctor would make comments that he makes, Mr. Stewart would make the comments that he would make. And then after they have made all their comments, you would say, all right, at this point, do I hear a motion?
So basically, I should have waited until comment.
Whenever.
One
Well, that'll be
One question I've got for Jason is, when this home occ that they signed off on 3 years ago, whatever it was, it's in here, I'm sure, as to what can and can't be done.
Correct. And this is part of what you have this table.
Yeah.
That first one, that table will show you home occ. It's definitely permitted. So that's one thing I wanted you to see. In every district and every zone, we allow home occupations. So we are definitely for home businesses, people trying to do self-employment, absolutely for it. It's allowed in every zone.
Okay.
The next page defines home occ and shows you what can and can't be. And if we're talking about this particular instance, number 2, occupational activities shall be clearly secondary and incidental to the primary use of the property as a residence and does not change the character or outside appearance of the residence.
So basically, when he signed off on that home occ, he could look at this and it said outdoor storage, no can do.
Right, that's presented during the issuance of a home
Right.
occ. So he's not unaware, he's
Yeah.
fully aware of what he can and can't do. Not only that, when he applies for a permit, and the application process is reviewed, questions are raised, which Debbie mentioned, somebody from planning and permitting, at the time, during that whole application process, they would have submitted an application, had asked very specific questions of what do you want to do? What are you trying to get approved for? And then they kind of would sometimes go back and forth. Okay, we understand, thank you for what you want to do. This we can allow you to do, but you can't do this, you can't do that, you won't be able to do this, but you can do that. That's all very, very well explained, I believe, from our end, the parameters of your business. And then one was asked, well, maybe we could park it somewhere else. Well, there's a difference. There's a home occ where you do a business and conduct your business at the home, and then there's commercial business. And I think there needs to come, especially according to this particular application, there's that point where you need to decide, maybe my business doesn't fit the home occ and it needs to be a commercial business. But referring to home specifically, it's very well laid out what can and can't be done at the home.
So basically, his total arguments on grandfather.
Are null and void.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me get straight to you. You mentioned like the pest control guy, whether they were parked. And what's the difference between him parking and this guy if it was just him?
So if I have an F-150,
Yep.
my own personal vehicle,
No.
I'm just saying,
Oh,
me,
okay.
Jason,
Yeah, with stickers on it.
yeah,
Okay.
no stickers, I own an F-150.
Right.
Cause I wanna make, Dr. Woodger happy, cause he's a Ford guy. So I park that in the driveway, I drive that every day to work and back, that's my own personal vehicle.
Right.
My next door neighbor has a printing company, and he does most of his stuff online, and he has a home occ. And his business vehicle is an F-150, but he's got a sticker on it promoting his business. Does that change the atmosphere of the zoning? Does that violate any of our home occ as far as changing what the people perceived of a residential zone? No, it's the same truck as I have. Now we're talking about a big truck, a huge trailer, construction equipment, that's what's different.
And
So-
let's take that one step further. Okay, the third guy down the road actually works for the exterminating company.
Mhm.
And he's allowed to bring home
Take home truck.
a take-home truck.
Right.
Why? Because he gets out early in the morning, he starts his route. There's no need for him to go to the home office every day to get his routes. They're probably sent to him now by email or whatever, all the electronic stuff. But he has a company vehicle.
Yeah.
Company vehicle's name is all over it. It's not really changing the nature of the neighborhood. On the other hand, let's say this. Instead of an F-150, what he has is a semi-truck. Or what he has is what I described, an F-350 with a trailer and so forth. That's not customarily found in a neighborhood. And that's one of the things that y'all would look at in the testimony is, what I'm doing that is supposedly a violation, is that something you see in your own neighborhoods? If the only complaint with here was, I have a truck, and on the side of the truck is the name Yelnats Construction, and they were saying that's a violation, you'd have to rule, that's not a violation. Because there are a lot of F-250s, F-350s that are parked in a driveway that have somebody's name on it. But where the violation comes in is the fact that it is now attached to a trailer, and the trailer has a backhoe on it, or a bobcat.
And that would point us to number 4 of the use standards of accessory use in a home occupancy. It says the property contains no outdoor displays or storage of goods, equipment, or services that are associated with the home occupation.
Now, here's the way you're gonna conclude this, is this way. Someone, you will ask, Mr. Chairman, as the chairman, you can't make the motion. But you need to ask then one of the members of the committee, Board of Adjustments, do I hear a motion on this matter? Someone will need to make a motion. And in making the motion, you can't just say I make a motion to deny. Or you can't say I make a motion to approve. What you have to do is say, I make a motion to approve based upon these 3 things that I've noted. Or I recommend denial based upon, I find that the home occupation was issued, that what's occurring on the property is a violation of the home occupation, whatever. I mean, you have to give a reason so that the minutes, in case I, as the appellant, decide that I want to take the city to court, the court's gonna say, okay, Board of Adjustments and Appeals, you deny it, but why?
Okay, but Mr. Fisher would advise us.
Correct.
He would guide us through that.
Absolutely.
By the way, there is a neat way that a chairman can make a motion. He can simply say, I would entertain a motion that includes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Correct.
Would anybody like to so move?
Correct.
You can do that.
So now we do the things.
Go ahead, I think Gilbert had a question.
So you made mention a couple of times of a sticker. Is it like a,
A sticker,
or is it?
no, like, a lot of times they get magnets or stickers.
Oh, yeah, like-
They could put on the door, that
I thought
put in the name
maybe
there.
you're like, like a sticker, you stick it in
No,
your window
not
or
like
something.
not like a taxi sticker or something. No, I meant like some kind of advertisement for the company, which is absolutely okay, it's not.
And for the record, my truck has the full wrap all the way around the window.
All right, the chairman will now entertain a motion. Anybody care to?
I'm looking at some items here to make a motion.
Okay.
Well, and just to point out, somebody asked about, why can't we meet at the house? And if you look at number 5, it says, no person or persons other than the residents of the dwelling shall be employed on site or report to work at the site in the conduct of the home occupation. This prohibition also applies to independent contractors. So it's very specific that can't happen. So this.
Now, what's your motion?
I got one of them. I'm looking for 2 or 3 right now. No, socket 2.
Really?
I'll make a motion that on Article number 5, no persons other than residents of the dwelling shall be employed on site or report to work at the site in the conduct of home occupation. This prohibition also applies to independent contractors.
How about number 6, there should, any elements?
But yeah, wouldn't that be the trailer? Yeah, number 6.
Yeah.
One more.
Number 7.
Well, do we actually know that?
500 square feet.
Well, even if you only have 2, you just have to state a basis for your.
Basis for my motion,
Yeah.
number 5 and number 6.
Okay, second. Any?
I'm gonna throw in number 4 just for the heck of it.
Okay.
Because when you do the minutes, they have to show
So,
it.
number 4,
Okay.
that's the-
All right.
number
That-
4,
That's
4,
the
6,
thing.
and
4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6.
Of course, I'll state exactly what each
Yes.
item is.
Absolutely. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say aye. Ayes have it. Sorry, you're out to lunch.
Well, I appreciate that. What I would like to do, though, is go ahead and pass out my business card. Any work, I mean, I've got a great,
For a minute there, I thought you were gonna stand up and pull out a gun.
That was the last dude.
That was the last.
They
the,
still have ice houses?
the testimony that I gave you is very real.
Yeah.
It's what you're gonna hear.
Oh, yeah.
And I can tell you my years of doing this type of stuff, and many times in the private sector, I was actually hired to present the person who was charged with something. I mean, this is what you're gonna hear. So I hope it was beneficial.
Yeah.
Did we ever fill out this variant sample decision tool?
That was just something for you to view of maybe some of the questions you would want to ask.
Like Dr. Woodruff said, Mr. Fisher will be here to guide you
Right.
from A to Z. Exactly what you need to ask, and he will also guide the person that's complaining. And then if there are any witnesses, we will hear the witnesses out. But then I think you're asked to leave while the board can discuss, if they have any discussions after the hearing is closed, or not when it's closed, but after he's submitted everything.
He does, he goes.
Right, then him and the witnesses will go out, and that's when the board can discuss amongst themselves different.
That way we can come up with whatever motions.
And we'll have in there a recommendation from staff
Right.
that we recommend you deny this appeal and then list each and every violation. This is a violation number 10, because he even said himself, the road isn't very good. Well, he's driving a truck and trailer with a bulldozer down the road every day, no wonder the road, but it'll define every violation that we found in that packet.
Well, we know y'all don't meet on a regular basis, and that's actually good.
Yes.
But it is important to have this training just simply to refresh your memory. And I will tell you, the mayor and council greatly appreciate the service y'all give, because a citizen should and does have the right to always question the decisions of the staff. And your role as the Board of Adjustments and Appeal is to say, is the staff correct in applying the law, or no, they're not correct? So with that,
There's a
the
very,
ordinance construction has work to do, so do you need me any further?
Your excuse. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, sir.
Let's see, closing comments. We ready for that? Anybody have any closing comments?
Well, I would just want to thank
thank you.
Dr. Woodruff for coming and doing this work and being the acting as the plaintiff here, and giving us, spending the time to put that together. Thank you.
Our pleasure, good job, Steph.
Thank you.
I'm gonna leave the door open, because it's getting kind of
Yeah,
hot.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It's kind of.
I don't know if you consider this a closing comment, but if by chance, I'm working the early voting.
Okay.
You may, if you
Yeah,
haven't
we saw
voted,
you
Oh,
out there.
yes.
we're still open from 8 o'clock in the morning till 7:30 at night. Tomorrow, Friday, and then from 8 to 3 on Saturday.
What time tomorrow?
8 to 7:30.
Okay.
But then after that, you're just gonna vote on a regular voting day on the 3rd of November. On the 3rd of November, the March.
Oh, we get time then.
March.
And it hasn't been that busy, so.
Nope,
Staff, y'all
next
have any
week, that's
comments?
it.
That's it.
No, I don't.
Motion adjourned.
Well, Phyllis, I think.
I
Phyllis has
I
something.
was going to just
So moved.
mention that you may have a citizen show up in opposition that wants to speak, or one that not likes this guy and wants to speak on how he employs people.
Okay.
And sometimes these people don't intend not to follow the home occupation. They start out as a small little business, and if they do a really good job, they're gonna grow.
Right.
And eventually they could outgrow their spot.
Sure.
They need to go
I've
commercial.
seen it all the time.
That's why I do it a lot,
Yeah.
which is good.
Did you, everybody's kind of, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So, second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Ayes have it.